Thanks for staying with us on the news at 1. Let's take a look at your market news now. Asian shares were mixed in cautious trade today as investors wait to see whether U.S. Republicans can hammer out a tax reform deal quickly, while the British pound fell on growing doubts over Prime Minister Theresa May's leadership. Japan's Nikkei dropped to a near 2-week low as many sectors, including property and brokerage firms, languished after recent rallies, offsetting gains in companies with strong results such as Nissan Foods. The Nikkei ended 1.3% lower. Hong Kong's benchmark stock index rose slightly, reflecting general caution in Asian equities. The Hang Seng index added 0.2%. Mainland China's major indexes extended, powered by banking firms, as investors cheered Beijing's deregulation in the financial sector. The Shanghai Composite Index gained 0.4%. Wall Street ended marginally lower on Friday, with losses in Intel and Apple, as investors worried about the future of promised corporate tax cuts following different plans unveiled by Republican lawmakers. The Dow Jones Industrial Average fell by 0.1%. The S&P 500 slipped by 0.09%, but the Nasdaq Composite Index edged up 0.01%. The S&P 500 and the Dow ended the week lower for the first time in 9 weeks. Now, for more on the markets, we cross over to the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. Francis Hurd is standing by. Good afternoon, Francis. The Rand falling by 1% by 12 o'clock this afternoon.
Yeah, not looking good. And Nzinga, it seems like that is all to do with the talk that President Jacob Zuma will imminently announce that plan for free higher education or free education across the board. Since 12 o'clock, the Fees Commission report has come out, the Hare Commission, but that doesn't seem to have changed anything. We're still at around 14.50. And remember, the Rand went above 17 even after the sacking of Nhlanhla Nene. That response was happening early 2016, in the middle of last year, then the Brexit vote. But since then, the Rand has been below 14 to the dollar generally, I would say. But recently, things have changed and we are now heading to close, 14.50. We're heading to 15 Rand if this downward weakening trend continues. But let's get some analysis. I'm joined by Gary Boysons from Rand Swiss at the JSE. Thank you for being with us. Do you agree with me? It's all about free education.
I think it does look like that is the driving force today. You've got obviously the rand on the back foot against the dollar and the pound, so it's not international factors. You could potentially say that there is some risk off trade based on Donald Trump failing to push through his tax cut policy. But again, this looks pretty certain that this is investors in South Africa just maybe taking a more cautious view again ahead of a potential ratings downgrade on the 24th, and then obviously the December conference as well. So as you said, we did get some more information around the free education policy, but again, I think the markets are kind of expecting an announcement probably just after the 24th, so somewhere between the conference and the the downgrade. So it just adds a whole nother, I suppose, risk element for market traders.
Well, rating agencies will look at the reports, and is the concern that even if they were on the fence, we are now looking at a downgrade? Because this is also about institutions. The Treasury losing the head of the budget office, the DG previously left when Pravin Gordhan left. So is it about that as well?
Certainly, I think a weakening of the South African institutions has been a major concern voiced by the ratings agency. So I think that certainly plays into it. But again, we have to look at how much of this is already priced in. So this is, we're just wondering, is this the straw that breaks the camel's back? Because at the moment we have seen the Rand move out quite aggressively from the 1280 level. So already how much of this is priced in? We normally look at credit default swaps, and already it's pricing in a downgrade. So we're saying the market is telling us that there's going to be a downgrade, and potentially even a second downgrade further into junk after that. That's what the financial markets are actually pricing. So, again, this is just a lot more noise around it, and it's certainly not going to. I don't think it's going to help settle any nerves the ratings or concerns the ratings.
So I always hear this, that things are priced in, but then the Rand still dives, or maybe it comes back, but you see a bit of a reaction at the time. Could the rand weaken further, considering that we were at 17 more than a year ago, but in recent history, I guess?
Certainly, if you look at what happened, in the downgrade of Brazil, you actually saw the currency there strengthening on the actual announcement of the downgrade. Okay. But generally in financial markets, there's always still a slight risk premium on before the actual event happens. So I would expect the rand to weaken. But that said, the rand is one of the most volatile currencies in the world, and what I think has really been acting in its favour is our high yields and still being non-junk status country. So the traders are calling it the yield shield, but certainly people now are looking through that and just seeing what I suppose the underlying politics in South Africa, the lack of growth that we have, and starting to get concerned that when you're buying bonds, you might be getting a high yield, but yields can always go up and bond prices can fall.
Yeah. All right. So despite the bad news for the rand, the JSE doing very well. If we look behind us, some stocks benefit from a weaker rand, and Naspers is huge. So is that what's happening?
Yeah, so again, you look at it, I think about 60% of our market is actually offshore anyway. So certainly the stock market is benefiting from the weaker currency, but that doesn't necessarily help South Africans in general. It might help boost up pension fund returns slightly, but certainly I don't think a good picture.
Can it continue, this disconnect between the real economy and the market? Maybe it can if it reflects overseas prices.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the real issue is that given the local situation, that business confidence is so low that all the JSE-listed companies are choosing to invest offshore rather than local. So what's actually happening is you're seeing a lot of these companies becoming more and more offshore exposed. That's one of the reasons that people invest in stocks, is that you have a management team that can make decisions, and when they see that an investment climate is deteriorating, they can go and invest in a territory that is more attractive. Whether they're going to leave their listings on the JSE, though, is something that I think maybe the local market should be a little bit concerned about, because you look at the likes of Steinhoff, moving its primary listing to Frankfurt. Once the majority of your revenue and assets sit offshore, why even maintain a listing locally?
And then you don't have to bring those rands back into the economy.
Exactly, you start reporting in euros or dollars.
All right, Vodacom went past 40 million, I can't believe it, 40 million customers in South Africa, but their share price hit, last I looked, 3.8 or nearly 4% down. Why are investors disappointed with Vodacom half-year results?
Yeah, so looking at it, again, it's a miss of the expectations on the numbers. So it also cut its dividend slightly. This was partly because they're funding their deal with Safaricom, so they've obviously bought a large chunk of Safaricom, and that's putting a little bit of pressure on cash flows in the short term. But also I think traders and investors just a little bit concerned with the slowing of the growth in data revenue. So certainly still managing to acquire subscribers in South Africa, still expanding market share, which is a very good news for the business. But I think really the big story around increasing data revenues is coming under a little bit of pressure as data prices fall, and data prices are falling a little bit more quickly than people expected.
And that pressure will continue from government, from consumers. We all want it.
Absolutely, and I think the real problem in South Africa is that we also have limited spectrum available too. So, companies like Vodacom unfortunately have to go and invest in infrastructure to manage to meet those data needs, which also takes off that that big premium that you were going to get. So yeah, certainly very difficult, and it's interesting. Vodacom is still priced as very much a growth company, but more and more these telco companies are starting to look more like utilities, and if you start thinking about them as a utility, they start to look very, very pricey.
All right. Finally, Lewis, I think, is always interesting because of the credit sales historically. So what do those results say about the South African consumer?
Well, certainly the South African consumer is still under pressure. So, we didn't see too much movement in the stock price because they did guide for headline earnings to be down, around 15%, which is where they are. But certainly it's an industry that is under a lot of pressure, and they're seeing all the things that we're seeing from all the other sources as well. Low-income consumers definitely under pressure. Living costs are increasing, and also the more stringent rules around from the National Credit Act is also hampering credit sales. I suppose on the flip side, though, you are getting an increase in collections because I suppose Lewis is now selling to people that pass affordability assessments, so you're pretty certain that they will be able to pay for their furniture. The problem is they're not moving the merchandise.
All right, thank you so much for your analysis. Vodacom, fascinating. So 40 million people, but still investors who are hard to please are not happy today. And let's take a look at the overall numbers, the rand, the JSE. Here's a look at your main financial indicators.